Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back to Shanti in Place, our weekly meditation and wisdom teaching gathering. We're so delighted you could be here. We're also streaming live on Facebook Live as well as YouTube. Let's all just take a moment or two to get ourselves situated, to find our comfortable seat, and we'll begin our meditation in just a few moments. Finding, as we always do, or as we always seek to at least, finding that sukhasana, that comfortable seat, whatever that may mean for you. For some of us, we're sitting in chairs, and that's absolutely fine. Just taking a moment to more intentionally and with more presence, ground ourselves in our chairs, placing our feet down on the ground, perhaps feeling the vibration, the stability, the physicality of the floor or the ground as it makes contact with our feet or our shoes. Feeling with awareness the seat as it makes contact with the base of the spine. Just giving ourselves permission to readjust if we need to. Sometimes it takes just a few moments to find that right, comfortable, natural seat for ourselves. And if we haven't already done so, an invitation here to close the eyes, or if we feel more comfortable, half close or soften the gaze. We'll begin, as we generally do, with taking 3 intentional deep breaths together. Inhaling deeply through the nostrils if that's accessible to us. Holding for just a few seconds. And then releasing the breath either through the nostrils or softly between the lips. We'll do that 3 times together. Breathing in through the nostrils. And releasing. Again, breathing deeply in through the nose. And letting go. A 3rd breath in. And releasing. Now allowing our breath to find its natural pace, its natural rhythm. Not controlling or manipulating or forcing the breath in any way. Just taking a few moments, allowing the breath to find its own pace. Continuing to breathe in the natural rhythm of the breath, and noticing the breath. Observing its flow, its texture. Noticing that rhythm without analyzing it or entering too far deeply into the realm of thought. Just noticing it. Noticing the sensation of rising and falling, of flowing in and out. Perhaps of leaning in and then leaning back. Noticing the tendency of the mind to wander. No need to judge it or condemn it. Just noticing it and gently bringing it back. Bringing it back to the breath. Back to this moment. Noticing perhaps when we bring our mind back to the breath, a feeling of stability or of alignment. Noticing perhaps when we bring the mind back to the breath, the sensation of being rooted a little bit more firmly in our seat, being grounded a little bit more deeply in this moment. If that feels natural and with ease to us, we can observe that and notice that. And if it's something that feels really difficult, feels like something we're struggling with today, we can observe that too. Perhaps simply feeling some gratitude in being able to try in this moment. Continuing to notice our breath, continuing to feel anchored in our breath. If we'd like to, here we can imagine ourselves seated outdoors, imagining ourselves now in the natural world, perhaps seated on the earth, the ground, grass, sand, whatever feels right, without overthinking it. Just imagining ourselves somewhere out in the natural world, feeling the sensation of the ground beneath us, seeing ourselves or perhaps feeling ourselves connected to the ground beneath us. Imagining now a very slight, very gentle breeze. The sensation of that breeze or that wind as it touches us, as it brushes past our skin, the external physical body. Imagining that breeze passing through us, gently, perhaps even pleasantly, and we remain fixed, we remain grounded. Imagining now a stronger wind, the sensation of that wind as it makes contact with our bodies, with our skin. Perhaps it's blowing our hair or causing some slight movement in our faces. This wind is stronger. Its presence impacts us perhaps in a stronger way. And yet we remain grounded. We remain fixed. This strong wind, it too passes through us. We remain grounded. Imagining now, if we feel ready to, a very strong gust of wind. Imagining perhaps the sound of this wind as it rushes towards us. Perhaps this gust of wind brings with it some fragrance, some smells. Perhaps it causes us to tighten our closed eyes or squint a little bit more if we're softening our gaze. Perhaps we can even taste this strong gust of wind as it makes contact with our lips and perhaps even penetrates into our mouths. We feel this wind as it brushes against our skin, our limbs, our bodies. Perhaps we feel movement not only in our faces but throughout our bodies. Perhaps we feel some anxiety, some fear, some concern that this gust of wind is stronger than we are. And yet here too we remain grounded, we remain fixed. Perhaps we lean in a little bit more deeply into our seats. Perhaps we bring our awareness a little bit more fully, a little bit more urgently to the contact that we're making to the earth. Perhaps we anchor ourselves a little bit more deeply into that earth and into our own breaths, connecting us to the ground, to the earth, to our place of stability. Imagining now the gust of wind, it too passes through us. We remain fixed. We remain grounded. Returning our awareness to the breath, to that life-giving source of stability. Perhaps experiencing or feeling some gratitude, appreciation, some comfort in the stability that our breath, that this moment affords us. Bringing our meditation now to a close with one final intentional deep breath in, and then listening or chanting along to the sacred syllable Om as we exhale. Breathing in deeply through the nose. Gently and with ease, we can open the eyes. If you'd like to, you can rub the hands together, creating warmth, and place the palms before the closed eyes and open the eyes into your palms. returning your gaze, your awareness to this room and to our gathering. I hope everyone is feeling just a little bit more grounded, a little bit more rooted and present. I wanted to share this meditation on feeling grounded, this idea of grounding ourselves, because it's something that I personally struggle with, and it's something that I've found even just attempting, even just turning our awareness, turning our intention to this idea of being present, to being grounded, to feeling fixed in the face of so much movement, so many changing circumstances. Even just the attempt is so powerful. So I wanted to share that. And I wanted to just talk about that a little bit today in this short wisdom teaching or exploration of this idea of what it means to be stable, what it means to be grounded. We often speak of Shanti and place as being about cultivating Shanti or peace as a state of mind. And when we do that, or when we attempt to do that, we find that, as we've talked about in the past, to the extent that our minds are aligned, we have a strong foundation. But when that mind is misaligned, when it's not rooted and grounded in the way that these great wisdom texts tell us the minds are meant to be, grounded in discernment, grounded in wisdom and buddhi, or pragya is another word that's used in Sanskrit. When there's that misalignment, then the mind is connected to the senses and the sense objects. And wherever the senses and sense objects take the mind, that's where we'll go. And so we often have this experience of being carried away by the mind, whether it's in a meditation practice or even in, or we should say especially in our day-to-day lives, when we're faced perhaps unexpectedly with some change of circumstance or some challenging situation, or maybe even some really exciting situation, something that really gets us excited and that we suddenly have a lot of expectation and excitement around. The misaligned mind will immediately go to wherever that situation, wherever that circumstance, wherever that emotion takes it. But the aligned mind can experience it and yet remain grounded, remain fixed, not carried away, but processing and experiencing from that place of being an observer. The Gita talks about this as being a state of pratishtha. Sometimes pratishtha is translated as being fixed. Here I want to translate it as being grounded. And in the second chapter, Sri Krishna gives a really beautiful, really powerful analogy to understand this idea of the mind that's pragya pratishtha, that's grounded in wisdom. He says to Arjuna, as a strong wind can sweep away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses can overpower the mind and steal away our wisdom. Therefore, he says, O mighty armed Arjuna, Mahabahu, this is a name for Arjuna that means the mighty armed warrior. O mighty armed warrior, O one who is so strong, be similarly strong in restraining the senses from the objects, in regulating the senses, and therefore be grounded in wisdom, pragya pratishtha. So let's try to unpack and understand this analogy a little bit. Krishna compares us to a boat. And we can imagine that the boat has a sail, the mind is like a sail. And when there's a gust of wind that comes, it can very easily and very quickly the misaligned mind can sweep the entire boat away, right? That sail just catches the wind or is knocked down, and all of a sudden the boat is swept away. What prevents a boat from being swept away by the wind, by a gust of wind, right? Um, One way of approaching that problem is we can think about the different kinds of wind, and we can say, well, let's always keep our boats in such situations where there are no big gusts of winds. Let's keep our boats in such a situation where we only have to encounter very soft, gentle breezes. And that's one way of tackling the problem. But the difficulty there is we don't always have control over. In fact, we practically speaking have no control over the type of winds that we will encounter. Even with the best of intentions and the best of expectations, we can try to control so many things in our surrounding, and yet that gust of wind can overtake us even unexpectedly. What can at first appear to be no more than just a slight breeze can quickly become a gust of wind, and before we know it, the boat is knocked over. So that approach of trying to control the wind, Arjuna actually says in the Gita that controlling the mind is even more difficult than controlling the wind. So controlling the wind is practically impossible. But what we can do is we can have such a strong foundation, that we can have such a strong rudder for that boat, that whether it's a small soft breeze or whether it's a powerful gust of wind, we can respond to those external um, changes of circumstance with stability, right? So our stability, our groundedness, this idea of Pratisthitā, this is like that rudder to the boat. This is what keeps us grounded, regardless of what kind of wind we encounter. So Pratisthitā, this word Pratisthitā, or strong foundation, what does it look like in practice? Well, there's maybe three ways we can look at it. On one level, Pratisthitā is presence. It's being grounded. If for those of you who have an asana practice, you may know that there's a series of different asanas that are designed to help us to develop our ability to be grounded and to be present, right? So when we think about, for instance, Tadasana. Tadasana is an asana that invites us to have that strong groundedness, to be like a mountain grounded in place, to have that kind of stability, that kind of presence. And so just as we have that with asana practice, Pratisthitā is an invitation to cultivate that as far as our meditation practice, cultivate that sense of inner stability. On a slightly deeper level, Pratisthitā is also what one of my teachers calls being rightly situated. When we are in the situation that we are meant to be, when we're in alignment with our purpose, our dharma, when we're following the path that we're meant to follow in this moment, when that kind of alignment is there, we're rightly situated. That ends up being our source of stability. So I know that can sound very abstract. One example that may help to make it a little bit more practical is, and I'll speak from my own experience, from my own life, that I know one of the things that I can often struggle with, and that when I think about the gusts of wind, the gales of wind that often knock me down or take me farther from the higher self that I'm trying to cultivate. When I think about those winds, for me, they often manifest as things like envy, or the inclination to compare myself to others, to long for and covet what others have, and to put myself down, or to think that I'm not good enough, or what I have is not good enough. And when I try to introspect and try to investigate where is that coming from for me, and when I try to be honest with myself, what I often find is that envy, that tendency to compare, that lack of appreciation and gratitude for where I am and what I am, that's so connected to not being rightly situated. To the extent that I'm rightly situated, to the extent that I feel comfortable in my own skin and I know that this is the moment, this is the place that I'm meant to be, to that extent, even when the winds of the temptation of envy or anger or comparison or pity or whatever comes my way, I can I can respond to and I can resist those temptations because I am rightly situated. I am stable in the place that I'm meant to be. But when I'm not feeling that way, then that's when I'm easily taken this way or that. So pratishtita on a deeper level is not just stability and presence in a physical sense or even in an emotional sense, as important as those are, but pratishtita we can also take as being a kind of a stability, a kind of groundedness in a more spiritual sense, in a sense that connects us to dharma, to the natural order of things, and to our own dharma, our swadharma, the natural way of being, the right way of being for us, that which connects us to our higher selves and connects us to the entire universe and perhaps to our divine source. So, an invitation, a reflection, an exercise to ask, how can I be pratishtita? How can I be more grounded? What are the sources of grounding in my own life? What grounds me, and how can I more intentionally lean into that in my own life? Taking a moment or two to reflect on that and perhaps to journal about that, um, and to make that um, a part of our practice, a part of our life. Um, it's remarkable. Sometimes we can even have an intuitive sense of what grounds us, and yet we don't we don't give that gift to ourselves sometimes, even though we know that it's right, like self-care, um, that which grounds us, that which nourishes us, that which gives us stability. Very often we can intellectually know it, and yet we don't we don't give it to ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to be in that place of groundedness. So this is an invitation to reflect on what grounds us, but also an invitation to commit or recommit to what grounds us. So we will leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who need to leave, please feel free to do so. We recognize that everyone's got so many things. Hopefully you're leaving this session feeling a little bit more grounded or reflecting on what you can do to feel a little bit more grounded. And for those who can stay a little bit longer, if you'd like to ask any questions or share a reflection or realization, you're welcome to do so. There's some notes in the chat box. So thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for that, those affirming words. I think I also personally needed this kind of reminder of being grounded. So I'm glad that it resonated. Take care. Any final thoughts, questions, reflections? Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us. We hope to continue this throughout the academic year. This is a time of transition for those of us who are connected to the university, to Princeton University. So we recognize that, and we hope that especially at this time of transition, at this time of a very unusual, unprecedented start to the academic year, in ways that perhaps for some of us we weren't quite expecting it to be like this, that opportunities like Shanti and Place can just offer a little bit of perspective, a little bit of this grounding and stability that um, that for so many of us is just so helpful to navigate everything. So hopefully that's something that we can continue to do. Please continue to join us on Mondays at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. Take care.